Hello and welcome to this edition of Wineskins, a program that features reflections on the lives of the saints and sacred scriptures, along with information on topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Father Jim Korda. Wineskins is brought to you by the Annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our show today, I will interview Rick Krivanka in Part 3 from the series Spotlight. We will also look at the life of St. Damien of Molokai, as well as reflections on the readings for this third Sunday of Easter. That and more coming up on Wineskins. In our current issue, Dave Schmidt will talk about marriage and family life in the Diocese of Youngstown.
A number of years ago, when I was serving as a director of religious education at a parish in our diocese, a parishioner approached me telling me that she had recently suffered a miscarriage. She said, "Dave, I don't know how to mourn this. My church tells me that my baby was a human person from the moment of conception, but there is little support to help me deal with the loss of my baby." She was not alone. Approximately 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, and some estimates are as high as 1 in 3. That means that in the United States, there are well over 1 million deaths of babies through miscarriage each year. Unfortunately, our society often ignores the deep pain and grief that families experience through miscarriage or stillbirth. When a child lives only in the womb and dies before birth, all too often the parents suffer alone. Little is done to remember the child, and it is often believed that if no one talks about the baby, and if all evidence of his or her existence is removed, the parents will quickly forget. But this mindset fails to honor the powerful life and death experience that has already left a deep impression on the parents' hearts. Death may end the life, but not the relationship. Grief can be delayed, but it cannot be denied. Rather, to help someone contend with the pain that miscarriage brings, we must offer recognition of the loss and sensitivity to the grief process. We can start by telling grieving parents that their feelings are valid. It may take them a long time to say goodbye to their unborn child and let go of all the dreams and plans that they had made. Remember, the amount of time a child lived in the womb does not determine his or her value. From the moment of conception, the child existed, and the parents created emotional bonds with their baby. The grief of miscarriage or stillbirth is complicated by the reality that they have so few memories to cherish. This makes rituals, memorials, or other support all the more important. Parents will cherish the memorial events and rituals, and written materials or gift items will become treasured objects because they have so few mementos by which to remember their child. If you know someone who has lost a child through miscarriage, encourage them to name their baby even if the sex is not identifiable. A name gives the child a personal identity and makes the experience real. Do not hesitate to talk about the baby, using his or her name in the conversation. Also, send the parents a note of support or give them a call when important dates draw near, such as the baby's original due date, or Mother's Day and Father's Day, or the anniversary of their baby's death. Tell them that you are thinking of them and their baby, and you are ready to listen if they need to talk. Avoid saying things like, "You can have other children," or "It's just as well that you never got to know the baby." Such statements fail to acknowledge the unique personhood of the child whom they have lost. Rather, try to simply be present to the parents in their grief, and, if you must say anything, simply say, "I'm so sorry," or "I came to help you cry." For the last few years, the Diocese of Youngstown has scheduled a memorial service for miscarried or stillborn children in May, on the weekend following Mother's Day. If you know someone who has suffered the loss of a child through miscarriage or stillbirth, please invite them to attend one of the following memorial services on Sunday, May 19th at 2 o'clock in the chapels at Calvary Cemetery, Massillon, or Calvary Cemetery, Youngstown. Parents, family, grandparents, and others are encouraged to attend. For more information, contact the Diocese of Youngstown. Also, the Office of Pro-Life, Marriage, and Family Life has materials to help parishes and parishioners minister to those who have lost a child to miscarriage or stillbirth, most of which come from Elizabeth Ministries International. Again, contact the Diocese of Youngstown for more information. For Wineskins, this is Dave Schmidt.
This coming Friday, the church celebrates a feast of Damien of Molokai. To tell us more is Bobbi Bankovich. She is from St. Paul Church in North Canton.
When Joseph de Veuster was born, few people in Europe had any first-hand knowledge of leprosy. By the time he died, at the age of 49, people all over the world knew about this disease because of him. They knew that human compassion could soften the ravages of this disease. The leper priest, the hero of Molokai, was born in Belgium on January 3, 1840. In 1860, he entered the congregation of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and Mary, taking the name of the 4th century physician and martyr. When his brother, a priest of the same congregation, fell ill and was unable to go to the Hawaiian Islands as a sign, Damien quickly volunteered in his place. In May 1864, 2 months after arriving in his new mission, Damien was ordained a priest in Honolulu and assigned to the island of Hawaii. For the next 9 years, he worked in mission on the Big Island, Hawaii. Then, in 1873, after volunteering for the assignment, he went to the leper colony of Molokai, set up 7 years earlier. In time, he became their most effective advocate to obtain promised government support. Soon, the settlement had new houses and a new church, school, and orphanage. Morale improved considerably. A few years later, he succeeded in getting the Franciscan Sisters of Syracuse, led by Mother Mary Ann Cope, to help staff this colony in Molokai. At his canonization, Pope Emeritus Benedict said, "Not without fear and loathing, Father Damien made the choice to go on the island of Molokai in the service of lepers who were there abandoned by all. So he exposed himself to the disease of which he suffered. With them he felt at home. The servant of the Word became a suffering servant, leper with the lepers, during the last 4 years of his life." Damien cared for lepers of all ages, but was particularly concerned about the children segregated in the colony. He announced he was a leper in 1885 and continued to build hospitals, clinics, churches, and some 600 coffins. He died on April 15, 1888, on Molokai. As requested, he was buried there, but in 1936 the Belgian government succeeded in having his body moved to Belgium. Part of Damien's body was returned to his beloved Hawaiian brothers and sisters after his beatification in 1995. When Hawaii became a state in 1959, it selected Damien as one of its 2 representatives in the Statuary Hall at the U.S. Capitol. He was declared venerable in 1977. Pope St. John Paul II declared him beatified on June 4, 1995. And Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI declared him a saint on October 11, 2009, in the presence of King Albert II of the Belgians and Queen Paola, as well as the Belgian Prime Minister and several cabinet members. Some people thought Damien was a hero for going to Molokai, and others thought he was crazy. To follow Christ, Damien not only left his homeland, but also staked his health so that he might receive eternal life. Damien's symbols are a tree and a dove. In St. Damien's role as unofficial patron of those with HIV and AIDS, The world's only Roman Catholic memorial chapel to those who have died of this disease at Montreal, Quebec, is consecrated to him. The opening prayer of the Mass says, God our Father, in St. Damien of Molokai you gave a light to your faithful people. You made him a pastor of the church to feed your sheep with his word and to teach them by his example. Help us by his prayers to keep the faith he taught and follow the way of life he showed. For Wineskins, I'm Bobbi Bankovich.
I'm talking with Rick Krivanka from the Jesuit Retreat House in Cleveland. We were talking about some of the important things that we need to look at as church, not only as diocesan church, but as the larger church. What are some of those other trends that we need to really be on top of in order to make our church truly the body of Christ?
Sure. I think one that stands out, and as we were talking about young adults or people of every age, that we really are places of wonderful welcome and hospitality. And I remember a wonderful quote by Father Robert Schreiter at the Catholic Theological Union at the time, and he made a comment that it's not simply the one-time welcome to someone, but it's the beginning of a relationship where they're continually welcomed. And I want to share a story that always strikes me around this topic. I had a very close friend who was a Lutheran pastor in Greenford in this area. He died of cancer tragically and was very close to me. I think of him every time I receive communion when I think of the communion of saints. Anyway, his wife and children, young adult children, moved back to North Carolina. And I remember them going to a parish and they were very excited. They looked around at different faith communities and they found a Catholic parish that most inspired them. Catherine was saying, Rick, we're going to go into RCIA, and she was all excited. And I remember asking her sometime later how it was going. And she said, Rick, we would go there and we would show up and no one ever said anything to us. We'd go again. And then we were thinking, maybe no one talks to us because they think we're already members. And then we finally decided, I guess we're not welcome here. And they left. And so I think we all need to realize what a simple touch, a simple word of welcome. And even for people who are greeters, it's not like waiting for the people to come to you. Right. It's you going to the people. Right. It's like you're greeting them. And we all need to be thinking, are we making everyone who comes here feel welcome? No one ever says, I don't want to feel welcome. I've never heard that. And so that's one aspect. I think the other big trend, and this is in so much of the research on why people may leave for another denomination, is how important inspiring homilies are and meaningful worship. That is foundational to the church. We are a church built on the celebration of the Eucharist, and we have to realize we so need to do our best whenever we celebrate the Eucharist in terms of homilies that really speak to everyday living and a liturgy that really engages people in giving praise to God, and really as a community of people who really share that sense of shared celebration.
And I think I'd like us to now talk about how leadership can best bring that about and encourage that and really be supportive of all of that. We have been very fortunate in our diocese, both in Cleveland and Youngstown, to have very committed diocesan ordinaries and leaders. Talk about some of those from Cleveland and perhaps how you would have experienced some of the leadership here in Youngstown.
Sure. One of the things that struck me, first of all, and please know Bishop Murray's in our prayers. I find a striking parallel between our present bishops, Bishop Murray and Bishop Perez, that I think they really bring a joyful spirit to pastoral leadership. And as Pope Francis has said, joy is really important, the joy of the gospel and how we give witness to that. But one of the things that struck me is the great honor given to bishops in relatively recent times in our diocese. I'm not sure if people are aware that when Bishop Malone was an auxiliary bishop, he went to the Second Vatican Council all 4 sessions. Right. And later on, when he was Bishop of Youngstown, he received what I thought was a tremendous honor. In 1983 to 1986, he was elected, I think it was when the National Conference of Catholic Bishops had been formed, he was elected by his brother bishops to lead the national bishops. There's over 180 dioceses in the country. And so he was also the first bishop to be chosen rather than a cardinal or an archbishop. And so I think it was a wonderful sense of like, well, how do brother bishops see one of our bishops? And then going to the Cleveland side, in 1995 to 1998, Bishop Pilla, 10 years later, was discerned to be the president of the National Conference of Catholic Bishops. And I think it's just a great honor that we had bishops, that bishops throughout the country felt were some of the best bishops in the country. So that's why they elected them.
Let's talk about that whole sense of inspiration, because there are people that inspire us to do what we do. You know, I look at my own life, there are priests that really mentored me and encouraged me to look at priesthood as a vocation. And I'm sure your work over these many years and decades in the church is because of some inspiration in your life. Talk about some of those people who have inspired you and what they've given you to help you do what you do.
Well, you know, it begins with my parents, and I know their grandparents. They were people of deep faith. I happen to be first generation Slovak. My name is actually from a mountain in Slovakia called Mount Krivan in the High Tatras. And I remember my father talking about how my mother would walk and hike to Poland to a particular shrine. But I know you could not be a Krivanka without being Catholic if it was just who you were. But then I had an uncle who was a priest in the Diocese of Toledo, and he was a great inspiration. I was influenced by religious orders in the school I went to, a marist school. I was invited, actually, I was being recruited to become a priest, to be a marist father. I was very close to the Blessed Sacrament Fathers, and I think all of that calling lives in my life. Now as the director of Jesuit Retreat House, and in many ways I'm like a pastor of the ministry of that house. And it means a tremendous amount to me, because part of the essence of Jesuit Retreat House is to help people find what has the deepest meaning, the deepest sense of right direction, the deepest sense of finding God in their life. That's why people come there, and it's almost like my whole life has made this full circle. While I loved all my pastoral planning work, I feel that my whole life led to be executive director. The other thing I always find that's important to an inspiration is the importance of emotion. There's a wonderful comment that St. Ignatius makes when he talks about spiritual direction, and he says, it is not so much knowledge, but the inner feeling that fills and satisfies the soul. And I think one of the things we need to be so attentive to as parents and pastors, as leaders in different ways, to the emotion that's happening.
Sure.
And what's the deeper emotion that whatever we're doing or saying is evoking in people's lives? And one of my further reflections on that is I'm a believer that every conversation is sacred. Every one. This one, the ones we have with family members, the ones we have with total strangers, because every conversation, every one, can leave people with a little more life and a little more hope. So I would say to all of our listeners, whoever you're talking with in every moment, and also in a special way with young adults, as I spoke earlier, be deeply aware of, do my conversations leave people with a little more life and a little more hope? Because I think that's at the core of bringing God's love into our world.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for being with us and for your presence on the show, for enlightening us from the Diocese of Cleveland, but also your work with the Jesuit Retreat House there in Cleveland. We thank you for that, and God bless you in your work and your ministry.
Thanks so much. A great honor to be here.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
For more information on that current issue and to listen to Wineskins, visit the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown at www.doi.org. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Hello, I am Bishop George Murray. There are thousands of stories that I could share with you through our Catholic Charities agencies over the years. For example, there are elderly who are helped through prescription drugs. Young families are assisted with food and diapers. Countless lives are transformed and empowered to live with dignity and purpose. Your gift of money makes it possible to provide the many services shared through our annual appeal efforts. This year, we are also encouraging our Catholic faithful to consider volunteering their time and talent to celebrate the work of charities in our diocese. Won't you consider helping us this year?
The song we have for you today is from the CD called A Jubilee of Praise. It is by the Notre Dame Folk Group.
And to tell us about the scriptures for this third Sunday of Easter is Father Ed Noga. He is pastor of St. Patrick Church in Youngstown.
I don't know about you, but I pretty much like movies with happy endings. On occasion, I think we don't mind a provocative movie that might send us out of the movie theater with thoughts swirling around in our brain about a social problem or historical tragedy. But by and large, I think we go to the movies to be entertained, and we like to walk out of the theater with a smile on our face. As we journey through this wonderful season of Easter, the thoughts of the risen Christ does bring happiness to us, and it should, because our God loves us more than we even know. But the reality of our faith and the challenge of our liturgy doesn't always promise a happy ending. What we celebrate in the Easter season isn't a happy ending. Even the early disciples may have thought that the Easter reality would make life easy and sweet, but let's face it. There are many days when our faith leaves us with more questions than answers. In today's gospel, Jesus tells Peter to follow him. Follow him. And that following demands a radical change of life. As we see Jesus in his public ministry, preaching and living and healing and being with people, it's very obvious that status doesn't matter, possessions no longer matter, disabilities don't matter, age doesn't matter. When people encounter the risen Christ, God is all that matters. And Jesus over and over again with his disciples and with those with whom he came in contact with, focused on them, wanted to spend time with them, wanted to hear their story, wanted to minister to them in the situation that mattered in their lives. And those situations were not always happy endings, but they were part of their daily life, like our own daily life. A good story is more important than a happy ending. I think we see in Jesus' life his mission and his message, the reality of God present in our lives, our personal lives. And as we internalize that as people of faith, we need to always see God in others. And we know that at times in life, in our world, in our society, the stories of life do not always have happy endings. Even with the reality of Easter and the glory of Easter and the happiness of Easter, we need to take that power, that spirit, and that goodness and apply that to the stories of life so that the status, our possessions, our disabilities, our age doesn't matter. People encountering the risen Christ really matters. And that happens because people of faith, with our own stories, with our own realities, are willing to take the time to be with people, to show the care and love of a Savior who walked many paths, encountered many people, and put up with a lot of grief, a lot of persecution, a lot of ridicule. And yet his story is the best story because he was happy, he was willing to reach out, he wondered about people's goodness, and he brought God's goodness into their lives. The story of Easter is not always a happy ending, but it's a great ending because it's a great story. God bless you. For Wineskins, I'm Father Ed Noga.
Religion can be complicated, but the truths of the faith are very simple and basic. Love Jesus Christ and his people, that's the right way, the perfect way to simplify our religion. Wineskins is made possible through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. The program is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm Father Jim Korda, saying thank you for being with us. Have a blessed week.
This is Bishop George Murray of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown. Christ's resurrection offers a promise of renewed life within us. I encourage you to go out and spread the good news that Christ is risen, and glorify the Lord with your life. For the same Lord who has sacrificed his only Son for us sends us out today. Let us give thanks and celebrate his abundant life this Easter season.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I bought her an orchid.
What have I done for my marriage today? I sent my husband a love email.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. But she's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Make a change for the better. Need help? Go to foryourmarriage.org, a message from the Catholic Church.